Good evening, dear friends, and welcome to tonight's Truth Foragers here on the Boys in the Baltic Star channel. As always, we'd first like to give our thanks to the Boys in the Baltic Star, Luke, Ben, and Evan, who have lent us their channel once more. Rick and myself, as some of you may know, have been moved, shall we say, from various other channels and means of communication over the years. And it's nice, isn't it, Rick, to finally find um, people so giving and understanding of what we want to provide to those who wish to listen.
Um, we got really lucky, to be honest. I think we did. It could have been absolute, a nomad status as it has been for so many years, walking from village notice board to village notice board, putting up coded messages that so few people respond to, probably because they're in code. Um, and and we've found a home away from home.
Of course, after several months of uh, trying to stick with code, we did try hot, but no one responded to that either.
Mm.
In fact, I believe you were chased one night after setting fire to a notice board.
Um, to be fair, I mean, the accusation was that I did so deliberately. But I should point out that I was merely adjacent to a notice board when it caught fire. Now, I do accept that what I was doing adjacent to the notice board may have had something to do with its catching fire, but that was I've replayed it in my mind many times, and I feel that the the need for me to actually outrun pursuit and hide for much of the night in a shed in a back garden was, frankly, it was an overreaction.
I think as our fellow foragers, our snufflers for truth truffles would attest, spontaneous notice board combustion is certainly a thing,
Hmm.
and it has been. It's hard to say proven in our field, but as close to proven as something could be, Rick. And I feel you were very much the victim of unfortunate timing.
Um, I feel that as well, and um, I I think truthfully I get unfortunate about timing quite a lot. This does seem to happen to me more than most. And I can only put that down to one thing. It's the fact that there are mysterious forces out there that feel I'm getting too close to the truth.
And you often are. Um, Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We hope that you have been fruitful in your snuffling while I've been away. It has been a while, but that's because my colleague and I have been very busy. Um, Part of the time researching into urban myths, legends, and folklore that may have been forgotten over the years. But part of the time, Rick, we've been having to find you a new home because of how things have been with your lovely wife recently.
Yes, yes. We we we've been through a period of separation, which has lasted for the entirety of our relationship, and I had suggested that we should perhaps attempt to live closer together. And as it happens, she agreed. She was enthusiastic about it, in fact, and pointed out that there was a small place for sale just 2 streets over from where she lives. So I've put in an offer, and I'm hoping I'll be able to move much closer to her.
I assume, of course, that you have thoroughly checked the history of the building. Any suspicious circumstances around? Dusted down your divination rods?
I'm delighted to say that the building is a completely new construction. The previous one having been destroyed in a police raid,
Hmm.
and therefore there is no need to worry about any skullduggery on the site. I did even look into the nature of the police raid, which was associated with a cult of devil worshippers who were abducting animals from the neighborhood, and I did wonder if that might be a potential problem. But I looked into it, and the animals they'd chosen to abduct, none of them tripped any of my sort of my my little spider senses.
Mm. So no skullduggery on the site, but we could spend an afternoon with spades practicing skullduggery in the back garden.
Literally, yes. I mean, I suppose there are only so many hamster skulls a person can collect, but it's a possibility.
Fantastic, a delight. So, dear viewers, um, if you're in today, you'll already have gone through our rigorous vetting process that is automatically downloaded when you log in to this channel. Without your knowledge, but for your own safety, um, a programmed by our dear friend Rico um, has downloaded onto your hard drive and has checked your files to prove that you are who you are. And of course, Rick, it is we do it purely for their safety and security, their peace of mind.
Hmm. Yes, it's important that people feel comfortable knowing that the others who attend our chats are not planted by some dark organization or shadow conspiracy.
And the best thing is the program is completely automatic. We only receive a few snippets of very important information if anything is flagged. Um, I'm sure our viewers would love to know which person has a collection of clown and noses, but of course we won't share that with people. It's not our place.
It is not, after all. I mean, such a thing is you know just a human quirk. I mean, it's a completely normal thing to have.
Absolutely, exactly. Um, so thank you, those that are watching. We are here tonight to aid you in your snuffling for truth travels. While the two of us, Rick and myself, while we have spent many years snuffling, and tonight we have two um, myths, legends, folklore, some might say, that we have spent several months recently really poring over.
Mm.
Um, we hope that all our work will embolden you to maybe look into similar um, similar historical quirks. Um, Rick, um, some may not know that you are a prolific writer of pamphlets, books,
Mm.
leaflets, post-it notes, cards for telephone boxes.
Yes.
Um, do you have any important tips for our viewers this evening?
Well, there aren't any that are sort of specific to this evening's discussion. Nothing that particularly aligns with this, but I would point out something particularly important that is often overlooked, which is that people, if they are going to be um, foraging on their own, it's very important you learn to navigate by the stars, because they are pretty consistently the only thing you can rely upon. The number of truth foragers who've been led astray by electronic devices or hidden traps printed in maps. It's a long and horrific list of outcomes. Um, Navigating by the stars is independent of all of that, and you can learn how to do it quite easily as soon as you identify where Vega is and how to connect it to Canopus. It's incredibly simple.
Another fantastic tip. Is that in your latest pamphlet, Rick?
Um, it's actually in an upcoming one, which I expect to launch probably in the next few days.
Mm.
My rate of producing new pamphlets has fallen away a little bit. I'm now putting out no more than 20 or 30 a week, and accordingly, this one is queued up on the way. Um, I mean, I think it's an important one. I'm hoping its distribution might even exceed last week's triumph on the behaviour of frogs, which almost reached 5 people.
That's incredible. Good numbers for you. Do you still have your fax subscription at all? Many people still receiving theirs through fax, or have some people
The,
now upgraded? I suppose.
the vast majority do still receive them via fax, of course. It is a very reliable system, and it works for all of the community. I think we all have our own fax machines. It's a very consistent way of doing it. However, I have started to receive requests from people via more modern technology,
Mm.
um, uh, particularly in the form of uh, email,
Wow.
and this obviously it's taken me a little while to adjust to it, but it turns out there are some dial-up bulletin boards that I can direct people to pull down individual copies of specific pamphlets. Yes.
Fascinating. So, those of you watching, of course, if you're wondering how you can get a hold of this, worry not. As part of that program, you have all been automatically signed up. That's a surprise, Rick. We didn't want to tell you, Rico and I. I think we may have doubled your subscription tonight.
Oh, that's
I hope you
tremendous.
feel confident enough for that.
I'm looking forward to it. Honestly,
Wonderful. Someone told me that people may not be totally for it. They called you the U2 of the truth foraging world, forcing yourself on them. But I think it's for their own good.
I I think my record is clear on this point that I I am consistent and reliable in delivering nothing but sage advice.
That's undoubtedly so. And we're going to have some of that this evening with our two urban legends.
Excellent.
As always, dear viewers, if you click on the red sun, the boys in the Baltic Star have allowed us our points as they always do. I think they removed most of theirs. There's a few that I don't really recognise, but for the most part, at the end of each um, legend, we will put a vote to it. So I'll ask Rick if he believes or remains sceptical. I myself will say whether I believe or remain sceptical. And you, dear viewers, will be given the opportunity by clicking on the sun to choose whether you remain sceptical or believe, and we can get a taste from the room, as it were, and see what what way the wind is taking us, if I may say so. We have been allowed another section of points from the boys. Rick's tips, which is wonderful. So if anyone selects that, we can take a pause at an opportune time, and Rick can provide you with a free tip. I hope you don't mind, Rick. I know you do have you only have a few thousand tips. I hope you don't mind giving one or two away for free.
I can't imagine it would be a problem.
Fantastic. Maybe keep your juicier ones for your upcoming pamphlets.
Oh, well, I don't really think of it that way. I think all of the tips that I include in the various pamphlets are of value, and I'm happy to share them pretty freely among our community.
Splendid. And that's the that sort of attitude that has won you many friends and much coverage in the snuffling press.
Mm. Yes, yes. I mean, insofar, I mean, it's a small and tight knit community, but I think I have a reputation within it.
You certainly have a reputation within it, yes. So tonight, Rick, as always, you don't know which of our wonderful researched legends that we're going to look at. And I've picked two that we've been looking at recently, based around English village fates.
Uh-huh.
Of course, that should ring a bell. We've been researching a few of those recently, and I've picked the two that I found most interesting. And I know you've mentioned to me several times while we've been searching for houses, pounding the streets, as it were. The first one, in fact, is where is it? The first one. Ah, yes, the first one. Let me just update everything so we can get it correctly. I've got to get my spelling right. People may not know that I'm actually in charge of the graphics. That it doesn't just automatically work. That would be ridiculous, of course. And so
And quite disturbing.
it absolutely, absolutely. Here we go. It does mean our pictures vanish sometimes. People have said they think it might be the man trying to um, silence us, but it is in fact technology. So this first one is um, is the case of the possessed vestments. For those that don't know, many English fates have historical, very, very historical backgrounds. And in many, there are maybe a figure, a man, a lady, dressed a certain way as the spirit of the fate or such like. And Rick, we spent a drunken night trying to remember all of those forest spirits.
Mm.
We got up to quite a few, and that's what on that research and that sort of fun drinking game, basically, um, we came across some very interesting and troubling histories.
It's it's things that we had not really connected on our own, I think, isn't it? Um, when we mentioned one, um, you know, we would immediately know which village we were talking about and which character we were talking about and how they came about, and we'd have a little little comment about them about so I always like that story, I always like that character for one reason or another. And it turned out that there were a couple where both of us, for different reasons, had quite strong negative reactions to the character in question as as the evening wore on. Um, and I think one in particular did stand out, didn't it? I mean, it rather brought an end to the jollity of the evening, as we realised we might have overlooked something a little bit sinister.
True, and it had been quite jarring. Um, we'd just come out of a quite a light-hearted discussion about the rhubarb chap from Sutton
Mm.
who a charming fellow who would dance into the fates with sticks of rhubarb,
Hmm.
putting on the voice of former cricketer Geoffrey Boycott.
Yes.
A cheery fellow, and we'd had a good giggle.
Mm.
And then, as we were flicking through some of your dusty tomes, uh, we did happen across this character with a rather sorry tale um, that a certain figure from folklore. Um,
Mm.
it was there was a pattern which was concerning Rick.
This I think is what deep down had alarmed both of us. So for those who are not on the who weren't present at the drinking game, which is everyone who isn't us, um, this is the story of the Yellow Maiden. Um, the focus of various traditions in um, small villages around a little town in West Kent. Um, and we'd encountered this story through different routes. But yes, the Yellow Maiden did alarm us a little bit because, well, because of, I suppose, two coincidences. The first is that we'd both heard that the story was based on a real a real horror, a real crime, rather than something dredged from the imagination of the past. But the other thing is, when we thought about it, we realized that it's a very new tradition, new for this part of the world. It appear most of these characters date back centuries, but the Yellow Maiden goes back only to the early 20th century, barely more than 100 years ago, and that's a little bit alarming if you consider that it's based on a real tale, and when you look at the set of circumstances that now seem to crop up with the tradition as it's practiced today.
Very much so. For those of you who may not have heard of the Yellow Maiden before, clearly you're not from West Kent, where she does have some fame around the villages there. Um, it's the tale of a young lady who, I guess, if I was to put it into wider context, this village would have a fete every springtime, every May. Of course, there would be maypoles, there would be country dancing, there would be beers and ciders, there would be all kinds of happiness in the village. It's a way to celebrate the end of the winter and the enjoyment of the summer. The trees are starting to green up a little, and there are forests and woods around the village. And it's said that on that day, this this yellow maiden exited one of the woods
Mhm.
nearby, barefoot, dressed in a strange robe and headgear, um, and just walked into the fete itself and into the cake judging tent,
Mhm.
and someone went in to check on her, and she was gone.
Yes, yes. It's particularly disconcerting because those who are familiar with the fate crowd, the judging of cakes, vegetables, things of that nature,
Chutneys.
chutneys, yes, and definitely animals, is a critical part of the event, and it's very carefully scrutinized under very strict rules. Um, because British people tend to judge everything all the time, every day, everything they look at, everyone they talk to. But this is where the actual rule making for the judging happens,
Mm.
and we all learn at a young age the important characteristics of a parsnip, for example, which could allow you to assess its quality, its length, its density, its color, and its girth. Um, these are these are drummed into every British person, pretty much from birth. Um, so, I mean, walking into the cake judging tent is not an unexpected thing. It would be a focal point of the fate, but bear in mind this is a carefully monitored place within the fate, um, scrutinized all the way through by notables. The mayor was
Mm.
inside, all sorts of people, and yet none of these people, all of whom were by British standards sober and and awake and alert, and all were by British standards, reliable. Um, and none of them saw her enter at all. It's disturbing, frankly.
I think it took a few. This was what piqued our interest. This tale. There was some eyewitness reports from outside the tent of what they saw, and a few rumblings in the local newsletter.
Mm.
So we delved further, and what we found, we delved into the results of the cakes, of the vegetables, of the animals, the livestock, and so on. And one of the comments written in pencil that we found on one of the old documents was that a a particular marmalade cake had been awarded first place, but no one could agree that they had given the final score. And it was suggested by putting two and two together that perhaps this yellow maiden declared the winner.
It is, well, as you can imagine, it's pretty horrifying. A crime of, well, unthinkable severity by British standards. Um, there are few things that are more sacred to a British person than the sanctity of the judging at a village fete. Um, we would we would reserve more ire for someone who cheated or misrepresented such a thing than we would for people setting fire to the royal docks um, or you know destroying the Houses of Parliament. In fact, definitely much more than someone who would destroy the Houses of Parliament. Um, and on that basis, this is an alarming thing. But it isn't just the idea that the Yellow Maiden might have somehow entered the tent, cast votes to ensure a particular winner, and then disappeared. While that is incredibly shocking um, by British standards, it's it's actually worse than that because the maiden in question obviously wasn't recognized by anybody at the fete, just a random wandering stranger. But curiously, she has been seen at a number of village fetes around this town in West Kent, and never in the town itself. But a description of her did raise some recognition within the community of the town. So she was apparently known to them there. And in town, she was notable for being not the sort of person you'd expect to attend a village fete.
Um, very much so. Um, there was we found some contradictory records about who this person was. Um, some would some would say that she was a lady of ill repute. Others would say an elderly lady who liked to shout at trees.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some would say a harassed mother of seven out of control children, and yet others would say a rather a woman about town, a cad, a bounder of a lady who used to bomb around in an early automobile.
Yes.
But there were, despite all these different stories, there was an overarching thread, of course, which, as Truth Foragers, we pulled, that this lady was very much known and made herself known in these towns and villages. And as you said, the one thing that would be certain is that she would not judge a cake competition.
No.
And indeed, to keep the peace, there was discussion, I believe, between the local fete organisers that perhaps going forwards they would need to uh, dress someone as this yellow maiden to take on the cake judging roles, for they were, I suppose, afraid that all these different stories would whip the population up, Rick, and of course, slight confusion and upset would be uproar by British standards.
I mean, the thought that there would be judging by anyone who was not a member of the local council, a notable parishioner at the church, perhaps the mayor or some visiting dignitary. I mean, it is the kind of thing that would shock any community. Um, but I was often caught by the thought that perhaps the idea was that by adopting the Yellow Maiden as the totem of these festivals, you could get to a situation where you could keep out the real deal, the actual Yellow Maiden.
Mm.
Something which, as we learnt as we kept investigating, was far from the truth. Uh, the Yellow Maiden was indeed seen, but now expected to be seen at these events. But weirdly, the Yellow Maiden who had been appointed to that role, judging a cake and doing that kind of thing, posing for photographs and presiding over various ceremonial activities. Um, as you may know, the Splat the Rat is particularly something where the VIPs congregate. Um, but the big the big concern was that this appointed Yellow Maiden would indeed go and cast a vote. In some cases, an actual vote that would be counted. In others, it was purely symbolic. And yet, whatever vote was cast by that person would be changed to a different cake by all accounts the Yellow Maiden appearing and wandering into the tent. It's very, very strange behavior.
And of course, the all the records of those that saw the Yellow Maiden, um, the true Yellow Maiden, none of those were of those in the tent.
Hmm.
It was almost as if the person who'd been chosen and dressed, it was as if their hand was moved for them.
Hmm.
Some of the spoken records that we were able to glean from interviews were that they felt they had no control over what they were voting for. That they've been saying, "Oh, the walnut cake. This is the one I'm going to vote for. Um, the fruit, the rich fruit cake this year. This is the one." But
Hmm.
then when people saw the vote, it was never what was said.
Exactly, and I think this is where we are moving into the realm of serious criminality, um, because no matter the underlying purpose of the Yellow Maiden's visit, no matter what other horrors she may have committed, because we do not know, the thing that is seems universal is that she might be actually cheating one of the most important and noble traditions of the British countryside. An offence which, I might remind you, up until just a few years ago, could be a capital crime in this country, and now still is often punished with time in the pillory.
Very much so. I think many Americans and Canadians don't quite realise how medieval punishments have continued in many villages up and down the country, Rick. But um, but kept quiet, I suppose, kept away from prying video cameras and smartphones.
It's the kind of thing that is done more quietly. That's certainly true. I mean, obviously, the British Isles have a set of traditions in legal terms which are different from other countries. That you would expect that, um, and each country has its own standards for what would be considered the most horrendous crimes imaginable. Um, I mean, in France, for example, pasteurizing cheese is a very serious offence. Um, Failing to open red wine half an hour before you drink it is the kind of thing that can land you in very hot water with the authorities. And in England, if you're pouring tea from a teapot and you put the milk in after the tea, I mean, that can land you in very hot water.
Like the tea bag.
Indeed.
it's it's true, and of course the wicker men are a lot smaller these days, um, more like a wicker suit than anything, and bonfires are smaller, and stocks are well hidden, but these things do still exist,
Mm.
and so keeping judging and such things as honest as possible is vital. Um, and the fears of the Yellow Maiden coming and making those changes became quite a serious thing. Rick, we found around the 19 uh, just post World War One,
Mm.
early 1920s, that the Yellow Maiden was possessing up to four or five um of those who dressed volunteers
Mm.
every summer, and that was very much the peak. I would say we saw numbers fall slowly over the 30s and 40s, but
Yeah.
for those few years, it was quite a thing.
Yes, and then of course there was the scandal of a woman who had been dressed as the Yellow Maiden and who had been asked to cast a vote, um, and apparently her vote did impact the decision making process. And she swore, of course, that the Yellow Maiden, the real Yellow Maiden, had changed the vote. But she was not believed, and she was accused of the crime of corrupting the sanctity of the voting process in a cake judging competition, something which, well, I mean, she was before the magistrate in a matter of hours, and I mean, we don't really like to talk about what was done to her.
I think as we have those from overseas, I think it would probably be too upsetting for such ears. But those English listeners among us will understand that we will just say that uh, natural justice was done.
In the fullness of time, certainly, but it's pretty horrifying. I mean, the speed of justice in these rural courts is so quick that there is little time to correct mistakes, and it's a frightening situation to be in. Thankfully, as you say, the Yellow Maiden's appearances do seem to be declining, though she is still respected in a vast number of these village fates. Um, but we haven't been able to see the number drip away to zero. She's still turning up once, maybe twice a year, um, and people, I think, are quite rightly trying all sorts of the traditional approaches to dealing with the arrival of unwanted spirits,
Mm.
um, singing rugby songs, creating new protective Morris dances, um, and obviously changing the schedule of the village cricket team. The traditional rituals that can be used to keep the spirits at bay.
Mm. Um, for those that have never been to a village fete before, um, many now in Kent, the tent that is used for cakes and judging is often a purpley blue material, and this is because it's the opposite color of the color wheel, and it's believed that the purpley blue will negate the yellow, thus rendering her powers obsolete. That is, of course, if she does get through the groups of drunken rugby players, the
Yes.
um, the cricket team, and such like. And that's why it's important to have drunkards at fetes, of course, Rick, to act as a first line of defence.
Exactly, and I think if you visit any fete in Britain, you will be reassured to discover that there are there are plenty of people who are drunk by British standards.
And I think very much, and I think that rather than being concerned or worried about them, I think one must, as you say, feel safe, and that you should go to the beer the beer stall and buy a round of drinks for those who are drunkenly singing the songs to keep away the Yellow Maiden.
Yes, absolutely. It's an important thing to do to keep their spirits up, to keep their enthusiasm going. Because, well, as you know, if you begin to sober up, your enthusiasm for everything starts to fade. Not just singing, but your concentration in all sorts of areas. You become much less competent at the traditional fate games, and it really is a problem when it comes to the bag toss and things of that nature.
And a lot of these will start drinking at midday in order to take on their roles and their responsibilities. And there's nothing worse than
Yeah.
sobering at 3 o'clock. The evening can be quite unpleasant.
When it has been my turn to take over such things, I've frequently begun drinking at midday the day before, just to ensure that there is no danger of corruption.
You're a very responsible man, after all, though, Rick. That's you do have a reputation in our circles.
I have developed a reputation. Yes, I'm fully aware of that.
Now, have you ever seen the Yellow Maiden, or have you ever been at a fete where you feel that the cake competition has been judged by her, giving an unexpected result?
Um, I I have been to fates where the official Yellow Maiden has been present, of course.
Mm.
I mean, who hasn't in this part of the world? But but there is only one occasion I can recall where I actually believed that the Yellow Maiden may have been present. And when I say I believe she may have been, if I tell you that the cake competition was actually won by a date and walnut cake, a
A
cake made with
date.
overseas ingredients,
Oh.
I mean it's almost unthinkable. It was planted literally right next to a Victoria sponge that would have quite rightly collected the trophy. Um, I can only ascribe it to the Yellow Maiden, but for whatever reason, possibly I was in the middle of the rendition of a song, or in the queue for the beer tent to get a jug of mead. But one way or another, I managed to miss her arrival.
Mm. The recent, of course, recent calls in the villages in West Kent have been for more Morris dancers. They believe that Morris dancers hold the power, the strongest power, of course, to keep away the Yellow Maiden and indeed many other people.
Yes.
Have you? Everyone in Kent, every man in Kent has received call-up papers to local Morris dancing troops. Have you heeded the call, Rick? Will you? It's a noble
Um,
profession, after all.
I obviously, as you say, the Morris conscription is something that in this part of the world is just a fact of life. Um, and you're quite right that there is nothing that keeps all manner of individuals away from fates and community events more effectively than troops of Morris dancers attending. Um, I have so far taken the stand that I refuse to join up with any of the Morris men. Um, I've taken that stand for a number of reasons, and some of them are too intricate to go into here. But um, I think the most important is that um, while I am nimble of foot and able to conduct a dance, Morris men are not. So so I don't think I'd fit in.
Would you consider becoming a pearly king? Those also are drawn to the fates and draw all sorts of manner of ire from Kentish folk,
Yes.
disgusted at the Londoners.
I mean,
stepping on their
in
toes.
principle, of course, that would be more appropriate for me. But I truthfully believe that the tradition of the Pearly King should be retained to two or three boroughs of eastern London, and I do not hail from there.
Not officially, anyway.
Well, we can talk about origins at some point, but no, I would feel I was stepping onto someone else's culture.
Very wisely said, Rick. So, I guess we've looked at the tale of the Yellow Maiden, her appearance from the woods for the first time in a West Kentish village, her judging of the cake competition, and after that, how many of the villages and towns around have dressed up their own official Yellow Maiden, almost as a protection. That alcoholism and drunkenness keeps her away. Um, we have all seen, of course, as you say, the official Yellow Maidens. We have seen the drunkenness at Fates and felt safe
Mhm.
because of it.
Yes.
Uh, and we have all seen the burgeoning Morris dancing scene and all had our own feelings about that too. But in the case of the original Yellow Maiden and the possessing of those judging the cake competition, Rick Bishop, do you believe or do you remain sceptical?
Um, that's a fair question. Um, I believe that I remain skeptical for one important reason, um, and that is these contests are um, extremely highly regarded in these small communities, and I cannot quite shake the feeling that the story would be amazingly convenient in the more controversial judging categories. Um, if if a particular choice were to cause uh, discomfort and disquiet among the villagers, um, where a particular favourite is denied their trophy, it just seems a little bit too convenient. Like there could be something else going on here behind the scenes to protect the judges from any moral outrage at their choices. So there's a part of me that says it must be true, but there's a part of me that says there could be a conspiracy here to mislead over the choice the judges made.
A very good point, as always, Rick. And actually, it's a very good argument that you make. I myself, of course, believe. I I believe that there is this mysterious figure. I think our our drunken night was fruitful, and
Mm.
as they often are. And I saw enough that makes me believe in this figure. Um, who she is, we don't know. What her background is, we don't know. But I think sometimes that uncertainty adds more credence to a tale for me, Rick, as you all know. And there's something spiritual about English fates, and so it does not surprise me at all that there is a hand from beyond, perhaps making that final decision.
Mm.
As long as they don't start judging knobbly knees competitions, I'm okay.
I mean, there are few things rated higher than the Knobbly Knees competition. To be honest, I think possibly only the varietal rose judging is considered more important.
Mm, very much. So it's the jewel in the crown, as it were.
Absolutely.
So let's look at chat and see where they're going. Slayer remains skeptical, obviously won over by your decisions. Realm of Russ is a believer, which I like, and already half spliced a believer as
Mhm.
well, which is fantastic. So, for the most part, we're going a 4-2
Hmm.
in believing, and I think that's reasonable. Rick, I know you don't believe, but like you said, you want to believe, and that's not always the case with you. You're not the most romantic of souls, but at this time, this feels like it's touched you.
I have been accused of lacking a certain poetic nature. Um, it's actually something that my wife and I have discussed on a number of occasions, um, and not only at length but at volume. Um, so it is something that has been pointed out to me before. Um, I do wish I enjoyed a little more the epic nature of the poetic details of life. It would be it would be a nicer way to live and be. But on the other hand, I am concerned that falling prey to such things might make me less of the dogged investigator that I am. Someone able to put aside all of my personal feelings and press on to find the truth, no matter how deeply it's buried.
Um, and as we all know, in this community, you have gained somewhat of a reputation as a dogger.
I do have a notable reputation. Yes.
That's wonderful. Right. So I have one more, Rick, for us this evening. One that you first brought to me. Fascinating one. It captured my imagination. As you know, I do have the romantic, poetic soul, and I couldn't help myself when you brought to me the case of again tied to fates, the case of the falconer's whistle.
Oh, I see what you've done here. That's very clever.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
right. I was wondering how you would connect up um, this to the village fate. Oh, that's so very clever. I do appreciate that. And I know our viewers will as well. Uh, this is not so much the story of a village fate, though the village in question does have a fate, of course. This is the story of the fate of a village. Um, that oh, that's very cleverly done. Thank you. That has made my evening. So, um, the story goes, and maybe I should start by explaining how I came across this tale. I was investigating the various parish boundaries um, in parts of England that I rarely visit because they are a little too far north to be in my regular stamping grounds. Um,
Essex, for example.
yes, yes, Essex, Middlesex, those kind of places.
The north.
The north, and investigating this area, not far from the headwaters of the Blackwater River, um, I encountered repeated references to the village of Cudmore, um, a local settlement, which by all accounts was mentioned in the Domesday Book and referred to as being part of the holdings of a local lord on multiple occasions. A place with tax records and one that has undeniably um, earned its place in the history of the country, or at least Essex, which is part of the country, I suppose. Um, and as a consequence, I thought, I should look into finding the village newspaper, the parish council, the village records, just add it to my collection of cellars to crawl through and archives to
Hmm.
investigate and um, mayoresses to stalk. Um, and as it turned out, there's a problem with that because the village does not appear on a map. It doesn't seem to exist, which led me down an interesting route. A village that exists in record, but not one that you can visit, not one you can actually find, is remarkable.
Very much so. Of course, the main reason that you were there, which I think is important, really background to it, was that Darcy Bustle was giving a series of speeches around the north, as it were, Essex, Middlesex, into Surrey,
Hmm.
and so it was as much by chance as anything that you ended up involved in this quest around Cudmore and such like.
Exactly. I mean, she'd made a series of visits. Um, I think there were 20 or 30 places around the home counties where she gave her speeches, and I attended all of those, of course.
Of course, of course.
Um, and one of the stops was in Malden, and that's not very far from this part of the world. And I was thinking while I um, stayed there, bemoaning the fact that I wasn't able to find the same hotel that she was staying in there, which I'd managed on several other occasions. Um, but apparently, for some reason, she'd stopped telling people where she was staying. I don't know why, because the first 6 or 7 times I managed to share the breakfast room with her in the morning. Anyway, uh, as a consequence of that, I found myself at a loose end that morning and went looking for local relics, local legends, local stories, as I am wont to do. And unfortunately, um, as it turns out, you can't find the village of Cudmore. It's genuinely shocking to me. So I went to sort of where it was supposed to be, um, a, a complex journey. It's quite hard to drive to somewhere that isn't. Um, but I found the region and stood in the middle of it, looking around. And this is one of those stories which I suppose I have to take credit for giving it its name, because this is where I heard the falconer's whistle.
Mm. I I remember clear as day the my phone ringing and the excitement in your voice. It took me a moment to take it all in. Of course, this was in one of my periods of life when I was spending a bit too much time with Skanky Dave, with his uh, with his herbal solutions to my pains and my ailments, and so I had not yet fully aroused myself from my mattress on the floor at Skanky Dave's place, and but the excitement in your voice awakened me quickly at that time, and as quick as a flash, I managed to find transport up to Malden, where you met me,
Mm-hmm.
and it took me towards where Cudmore should have been. Um, I did not hear the whistle at that time, but you, your clarity in it sold it to me, Rick. It must be said, and when Rick speaks, dear viewers, with a clarity of heart, you must listen. He has a reputation, of course, in the community for speaking truth in these moments.
Yes, yes. I have definitely developed a reputation.
It's what is said that you do have a reputation.
Mm.
Um, in fact, my first stop was at um, the hotel. I first went to the hotel that you had been staying at, um, and Darcy Bustle's manager had said you did have a reputation. So your reputation has indeed spread.
It's actually one of my proudest moments that my reputation has reached Darcy Bustle's manager,
Mm.
and in fact her security team, who I was impressed to discover she had hired.
Yes, I did speak to one of the four gentlemen who said that they weren't they weren't used to having to work for people such as Darcy.
Yeah, yes. It appears that many must have must have recognized her talent and her importance, because I mean she now requires an extraordinary security and protection detail. It is it's gratifying, frankly, that she is so recognized.
I did have to say I didn't know who you were though, and I feel bad. I feel like Peter when the cock crowed. If I must be so Belric, and I do apologise for that.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I don't blame you for that. I'm not sure that we ever know who anybody is.
No, I didn't even know where you were born until quite recently. But that's a tale for another stream,
Another time.
another time. Um, so yes, so excitedly you met me. I believe legally 200 yards from the hotel, and took me to the point on the map that you said that Cudmore should be.
Yes, exactly. Um, which at the time, I think you were curious as to whether or not there was simply a navigational error or something of that nature. But when we got there, I think you found the presence of the interlocking set of roads in the middle of fields quite compelling. It was almost as if the roadways still marked out the centre of a small village with various offshoots and what have you, rather than a more traditional road junction that you might find in the countryside.
I immediately got out my notebook and started sketching the roads, and we won't discuss it now. But of course, when we returned home, we pulled it up alongside old maps of the area, and they matched.
Mm,
Um, but at the time, of course, we didn't know that. We'd sketched the roads. We'd had the excitement of the morning, and you led me into the trees from whence the whistle had come.
indeed, and I mean, obviously, I tried that when I first heard it, and I hadn't seen anything or found anything, and uh, I couldn't honestly say that it had any connection to the village at all. Um, but the little woodland there, it isn't very large, and you'd expect to be able to survey it pretty quickly. But when you eventually heard the whistle, when I was with you, um, you commented the same way I felt, that it sounded like it was extremely close, and yet we couldn't see any sign of who could have made the call.
It's as you said, it was a small wooded area, and the whistle definitely came from the wooded area. Um, when the whistle went up, of course, I instinctively looked to the skies, expecting a falcon or a hawk, perhaps, um, to flap its mighty wings and charge downwards to give us the chance of location. But there
Mm.
was no bird. In fact, weirdly, in that small patch of woodland, and this is a time of year where you would expect many birds in this
Mm.
area of England. I would say that there were no birds disturbed at all by the whistle, Rick.
I would agree. I mean, those who are familiar would know that after hearing the whistle, you might get the screech of a Gaia falcon or a hobby in response. But on this occasion, no, there was no bird of prey that we could see, no person to utter the whistle, and indeed no birds at all in that small copse of woodland. It was quite a surprise, though by no means the most spooky or alarming thing we've ever encountered.
I think as we um, as we progressed further, there were there became more and more things that didn't fit with the surroundings and the time of the year. There was considering it was July,
Hmm.
there was there was still autumnal leaves on the floor. There
Hmm.
was a slight icy chill at times. There was a small. Do you remember the small pond that um, I accidentally put my foot on, but there was that thin layer of ice that cracked before my
Yes,
foot went in?
yes, I do indeed. It was so thin that I mean, you could have broken it by dropping the tiniest of pebbles on it, and practically invisible. Uh, it was quite impressive, like a sudden midsummer frost, even though it was quite well on in the day.
Mm, definitely. The we started finding items, I guess, items that suggested people walking through, but there were no trails. So things that may have
Mm.
fallen there over several years, all following similar routes. Uh, the heel of a shoe was a strange one. The
Hmm.
a scrap from a coat, perhaps.
Yes,
Uh, some 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 small denim scraps. A, a, do you remember the Mars bar wrapper with the 1987 expiry date?
that's right. Yes, yes, that's absolutely right. It was a commemorative one for some old football tournament.
Very much so. The it looked like it was a path that had been once well beaten,
Mm.
but not for some time.
Indeed, and I think it was there that we decided we needed to take a closer look at the rest of the surroundings and walk what we could imagine might be the perimeter of the original village. Um, and there was really very little to see, but there was a very strong sense that there were just occasional little clues of what might have been there in the past. And then of course we heard the call again, the falconer's whistle.
Mm.
Um, and I think it was you who pointed out that the job of the whistle is, after all, to call back the bird. Um, and did make me wonder at the time if the whole village had been called back somehow.
For everything we'd seen going into the woods from the side where we'd have expected the village to be, um, when we skirted around the small wooded area, I would say, there was nothing, no scraps, no anything beyond the middle heading out in the other direction, suggesting that those that had entered this small woodland had either exited the same way or not exited at all. That perhaps these people had been making a one-way trip, and that made my blood run cold, Rick.
It it's always an alarming thing when you see that, and you do wonder if this is one of those spots in the world where people just, it's a one way. You go in but you don't come out. It's you know, Thunderdome.
Mm. It, with it'd be interesting to see Tina Turner with a falcon on her arm.
It would be actually something I'm sure I have seen somewhere.
the, so the village itself, while there are limited records to such a place, it does appear in um, poems from the 1700s, Rick,
Hmm.
of travellers travelling between towns and stopping for the evening in a place,
Yes.
making merry. Um, one of finding a beautiful young maiden in the village. Another of a cheery soul greeting them. But there was a couple that spoke of a whistle in a whistle in the evening, failing light. Rick.
Yes. Yes, in fact, the local public house, which I think had been known as the Red Boar at one point, in honor of this local story, did rename itself the Falconer at a certain point in history. I think that was back in the 1800s, and now, of course, there is no sign of the pub or the rest of the village. It is genuinely quite spooky, and I suppose I'm concerned about the possibility that it isn't just the entire village and its inhabitants that disappeared, but also that subsequent visitors might blunder into this same place. And we do have to ask the obvious question: if it was the falconer's whistle that called it away, and you can now hear the falconer's whistle as you walk through, could it be called back?
Um, of course, we only heard the whistle.
Hmm.
There is that diary entry we found. You went deep delving into the dusty tomes of the local library, of course, a couple
Of
of times
course.
over. I was, I'm always amazed how you use those machines to look through everything. And there was the diary of Albert Sissinghurst,
Hmm.
who spoke of a falconer who would appear of an evening.
He did. His tale. When I first read it, I sort of discounted it a little bit because it felt like it was written as something of an homage to the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin.
Mm,
Um, that this falconer would come along and use his bird to protect the farmer's crops, and you'd pay him a certain amount of money. I don't know. It felt too derivative,
mm.
an easy thing for somebody to concoct. But of course, the simple truth is the dates and the timings of these records mean that it does predate the disappearance of the village, and it's unlikely that he would have recognized the significance of the falconer had that not been important at the time.
It is true. Of course, in such villages all around England, you may be a regular in a pub, and you see your regular friends and those townsfolk. But every now and again, you do meet someone who's just passing through, or
Hmm.
has just come for a season, a farm worker, perhaps a labourer, someone spending time building something, trading something. So for someone such as a falconer to arrive in a village and be around in the pub or on the streets would not be
Hmm.
unheard of course, Rick.
Oh, far from it. I mean, falconers are not as common as they once were, but certain traditional occupations still exist. Um, I think most towns and villages in Kent still employ a union lamplighter to go out and manually light the now electric street lamps. It's a job that's become a lot easier since you no longer actually have to go out or do anything, but still, it's a union job.
It's a position of honour as much as
Yeah,
anything. Yeah.
yes, um, and and functionally, these kinds of roles do definitely still exist. And I mean, we all in this part of the world know a few falconers. They're not that uncommon. It's it's not a trade that normally has a shop front, but certainly you can find a falconer when you need one.
No, Skanky Dave says that he often likes to finger birds.
I've heard that. Yes, I've heard him say that. And I mean, I have tried falconing myself. Uh, It wasn't a great success, I will confess. I blame the bird. Um,
Mm.
I didn't have access to a an appropriate uh, traditional falconry species at the time, and it transpired that it isn't easy to do falconry with a duck.
No, they're not quite so good at protecting fields for a start.
They seem to have, well, they're very hard to train to do any kind of hunting. To be honest, they just don't seem to have the killer instinct.
They don't. They don't. But maybe if there was 1,000 of them, or one horse-sized duck, then perhaps they would have.
Well, I suppose so. If you could breed a large enough duck,
Mm.
then that could make a powerful weapon for clearing the community of vermin.
Hard to hold on your glove though.
You might need a mechanical device, perhaps, to launch the giant duck into the air.
Mm.
Um, yes, or as you say, you could go the Hitchcock route and have ducks that flock in huge numbers and turn up on climbing frames in black and white.
No, I couldn't think of anything more terrifying.
Truthfully, I think if that black and white climbing frame were populated by hordes of slowly arriving ducks, it would be genuinely alarming.
Across the with non-echoing quacks.
Yes, yes, a remarkable trick that the duck has.
So, Rick, the with the falconer, as you say, it's when we first thought about it, and we worried it might be just a derivative tale, a
Mhm.
cautionary tale that maybe the village didn't really exist. Maybe it was a tale of a village one across.
Yes,
You
exactly.
know. Um, so we did decide. We've been putting this off because this part of the story is where things get more sinister, I suppose. But we did decide. Well, you decided that we would camp in the small wooded area that evening.
I made that decision. I will confess it was not entirely down to my desire to get to the bottom of the story. It was also because I was made aware that a couple of Darcy's security detail were looking for me in the
Hmm.
town.
That's why you sent me to get the camping equipment.
That's right. Yes, that would
That
be the
makes
reason
sense.
for
Okay,
that.
that makes sense. Yes.
Yes, I mean, and at the time, I may have implied I didn't want to lose continuity at the site, but I did have other reasons for wishing to do it that way. Um, and yes, we set up camp in the woodland, right near the middle, so we wouldn't easily be observed by any passing security personnel. And we actually spent a pleasant evening, following our usual self protection rituals of drinking heavily,
Hmm.
um, and accordingly,
Did
we
did you enjoy my herbal supply that evening? You turned rather green at one point.
I. I'm not familiar with your particular blend of spices. Perhaps it
Not
gave
the
me something of
kernel.
a funny turn.
That's one way of putting it, I suppose. When you put your shoe on your head and declared that you were a duck, that was a strange part of the evening. But I just assumed that was part of your uh, your hunting ritual.
Um, I- maybe it just came to me in the moment. Yes, I haven't used that ritual before or since.
Mhm.
Hmm.
The,
In any event, we had a pleasant evening.
we did, and we were ready to turn in around 11:30, I would say.
Something like that. Yes, I mean it's hard to know exactly because obviously we both reject literal time.
Of course, and geography.
Uh, I'm opposed to it.
Quite right too. But judging by the stars, it was around 11:30.
There or thereabouts,
Yeah,
yes.
thereabouts. And we unfortunately I was only allowed to spend a short time in the village. People getting suspicious of me as I've been asking too many questions on your behalf,
Mhm.
and I'd only been able to get a small tent and a double sleeping bag. But your legs are very warm, Rick, and when we snuggled in, I thought we might have a peaceful night after all. But I was very wrong.
Yes, yes, we'd barely closed our eyes, frankly, um, when I had to make my first trip to empty my bladder. And it was probably only 25 minutes after that that I had to make a second. Oh, but you were talking about the other disturbances, of course. Um, the At some point, probably somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, I think I would guess. Though it was harder to spot the stars' locations from inside the wood because there were trees. The that falconer's whistle, well, it blew extremely loudly. We could hear it like it was coming through our feet, wasn't it? Like coming through the ground. It shook the trees.
Mm.
It was disturbing.
I, Not as disturbing, I'd say, as when I opened the tent. You'd left the zip half open, of course, from your latest toilet escapades, letting a chill breeze in. But as I opened the tent, I saw what looked um, like house lights from outside the woodland.
Mm.
And I called you to the tent. I couldn't believe it. I know. I These days I can't trust my eyes so much. Since the time I've been spending with Skanky Dave, I've learned not to trust everything that I see, and it's
Mm.
good to get a second opinion. But you saw them too, Rick.
Oh yes, we did confirm that we were seeing the same thing, and then began to creep very cautiously and very slowly through the woodland to see what we could spot. And as we reached the edge, we I mean we both agreed we saw a town, a village, houses, some with lights in the windows, others completely dark, but it was late at night. Um, there was smoke coming from chimneys. It was astonishing. An entire village that simply had not existed now appeared around us. This woodland we were in was now a central focal point of a multiple of houses built around, like a little bit of common ground in the middle of a small village. It was well, it was quite remarkable. And immediately, of course, we both leapt up to go and investigate after a couple of swift drinks.
I think the drinking is important, of course, for when you're making that that first step, I guess, into a new civilization. Whenever you enter a new place, it's very important in in this country, of course, to drink.
Hmm.
Um, it makes people trust you more. It makes you more accustomed to the space, and
Also, to be honest, if you were sober, they might mistake you for a foreigner.
and that's the thing, and one must not enter a space sober.
No,
But still, by British standards, we were pretty sober when we made that first step in.
by British standards, yes.
Mm. But every step we made towards the town, it faded, and we would stop and we took that step back. Do you remember? And it it lit up a little bit more again,
Yes,
like it was just out of
yes.
reach.
It was it was very disturbing. I mean, I felt like it was one of those dreams where you're racing towards something that's always just out of reach.
Mm.
Um, we tried walking backwards, we tried jumping towards it, we tried sprinting and then sprinting back and creeping very slowly towards it. All of the scientific methods for dealing with movement over ground. Um,
You tried weeing 3 or 4 times in that hour.
I did, though. To be fair, that wasn't really part of the ritual.
Oh,
Um, and I did rather regret that when later on we decided to try using the wheelbarrow approach to see if that would work, because I put my hand in something warm.
it's why I chose to be the pusher.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yes, but nothing we did, absolutely nothing, stopped the dwellings fading from existence as we approached them, and before too long, even backing away from them refused to maintain their solidity, and they faded once again, which was, oh, it was desperately sad, wasn't it?
it was for me. It was made worse by the fact that I don't know if you saw you. You said you may have done at the time, but I was by that time I was doubting your mental powers. You seemed tired and weary, but and
Mm.
bleary eyed. But I could have sworn I saw the falconer standing at the edge of the wooded area,
Mm.
gazing upon us as we wheelbarrowed forwards and backwards, and the village started to fade.
I I remember you pointing it out. I think at that point the blood was rushing to my head a little bit, and I wasn't focusing as well as I should have been. I did think I caught a glimpse of the falconer out of the corner of my eye, but I certainly believed that you had seen him, and well, I think we both agreed, did we not, that instead of pursuing this figure, should we be able to find him again, it might be best to abandon our camping supplies and withdraw to a safe distance.
Yeah, well, although 40% of me thought it may have just been a tree, enough of me thought that evil juju was at work.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first tree I've run away from.
No, often after you set it on fire.
That does sometimes happen. I've got to look into why. That is definitely something I've got to look into.
But anyway, we fled. But I'd say it was a strategic fleeing.
We only withdrew as far as we needed to in order to be holed up inside the portico and porch of a local hostelry when they opened in the morning.
Indeed, it was comforting, and your strong arms kept me warm through the rest of the evening, and which I appreciate. Thank you very much. And
Well, it had turned mightily chill at the disappearance of the village, hadn't it? The temperature had fallen away so suddenly that there was a notable mist.
mm, there, there really was, and of course, one must not trust their eyes in mists. Of
Mm.
course, so we both tried to close ours and get somewhat of a sleep. And when we were awoken by the bin men that next morning, they mistook us for drunkards, which of course you put them right very quickly.
I did quickly, and I think without slurring too much.
I think so, and I, I would say by British standards we were incredibly sober that morning.
By British standards, definitely.
Um, so that morning after we'd it turns out that the local hostelry was a Weatherspoons pub, and so we were able to top up our beer intake at 8 o'clock in the morning,
Yes,
and had a fried breakfast.
that too.
And then after you spent only about an hour and a half checking local news for the location of Darcy Bustle. We
Uh,
headed back to Kent.
yes, we did. And I mean, truthfully, there's a part of me that feels we should go back and explore again, try another time. But there's a part of me that fundamentally really doesn't want to.
It's I think every now and again. So for those that watch us, sometimes our experiences are merely through the pages of a book. Sometimes through photographs. Other times, of course, Rick, we have found the truth through videos,
Mm,
whether Darcy's herself or the snooker players. Do you remember
mm.
the mind control? Of course.
Absolutely.
But there's been a few times where we've come face to face with what we're searching for, whether that was the sitting in the shed for the burnt down bar, if you remember,
Mhm.
the bartender's daughter. Um, when we went to the house and checked that strange old house with the alarm clock.
Yes.
Oh man! And but this one for me was the one that sent chills up my spine, and I still can't truly come to terms with what I saw that night.
It's it's a very alarming thing. And we were both, by British standards, sober,
Hmm.
and by British standards, awake. So it's reasonable to assume that what we saw. And we saw essentially the same thing. I mean, trivial differences when we came to compare notes afterwards, but they were trivial. It was an extremely unnerving experience, and I must confess I could probably go the rest of my life without hearing the falconer's whistle again.
I could I could tell it rattled you because the next evening you left your home and you came and sat with me and my recently discovered friends outside of old Kane's Amusements for a few hours,
Absolutely.
and that's not something you would have done most other evenings.
Well, I'm afraid of Tories.
Quite right, and behind that door, all bets are off.
You simply don't know what's there.
But sometimes better the devil you know than the devil you don't, perhaps.
Absolutely. And there's a familiarity with having been there so many times and been so close to it. So that could be helpful. Yes.
Um, Skanky Dave does want to know if you will pay his the £50 you do owe him, though.
We've come to a disagreement over whether or not I owe him the money. He feels very strongly that I do, and I feel very strongly that I don't, and that we're at a bit of an impasse. However, I am obviously prepared to make good on the money because it would just be nice to stop him shouting.
And the thing is, you do have a reputation,
That is true. And if one has a reputation, one must always live up to it.
and you certainly are at this moment.
Mm.
So I think we could argue that we had first-hand experience of hearing the falconer's whistle.
Absolutely.
By British standards, we were sober.
Yes.
By British standards, we were awake.
Mm.
And by British standards, Skanky Dave's herbal mix was low in our bloodstream.
Mm.
So, in the case of the falconer's whistle, and I'm going to pause here because I'm actually going to play some music for once. Here we go. Rick Bishop, do you believe or do you remain skeptical?
I was there. I know what I saw. And by British standards, I was competent. I believe.
Whew, a relatively rare Rick Bishop belief. And Rick, I was there with you. I shared a sleeping bag. I held hands with you in the most terrifying parts. I held your ankles as your urine-drenched hands rubbed across the grassy fronds. I'm pretty certain I saw the Falkland myself,
Mm,
and I know that first pint of Wetherspoons that morning never touched so good in my life.
mm.
And so, just like you, I believe. And looking at our dear viewers, Slayer believes, already half spiced believes, Russ believes, but Sparrow remains sceptical, mostly because of the British standard, I think.
Yes,
Rick,
possibly.
would you like to briefly, before we leave, would you like to explain how the British standard weighs up against international scrutiny?
Yes. In this country, we have a number of different things that we refer to as British standards. Many years ago, there was an official government British standard for important things such as intelligence, competence, and sobriety. Um, and it came with a sort of kite mark thing that they issued. It was it was the British standard that said you weren't supposed to fill your car tires with hydrogen. It was the British standard that said you weren't supposed to attach cheese to the outside of your house. These were all very sensible, I feel, and and then over time those British standards have fallen out of use, but within British society they're still very much followed. So while there is a government standard, for example, for the size of a pint of beer, for example, being 1 pint in size, there is a British standard for a pint used in a phrase like, I'm going out for half a pint,
Hmm.
I'm going out for a pint. And the
Going
British
out for a
standard
couple.
is
Yes.
two, three, three
Yeah.
and a half, that kind of number. Um,
Oh,
it's completely reasonable if you live here, but I fully accept it doesn't quite match up to everybody's definition of the word standard.
exactly. For those in England, going out for a pint means three. Going out for a couple means five.
Mhm.
Going out for a few could you could be there till morning.
Yes, and I mean the amount that you could have to imbibe if you'd actually told someone you were going out for a drink. I mean that could sink a
Phew.
medium-sized warship.
It truly could. So, some wisdom from Rick there, dear Sparrow. But I believe Slayer redeemed Rick's tip, Rick. And there's a man who has thousands of tips spread across many pamphlets and post-its and cards stuck into telephone booths next to other more interesting cards. Could you share a tip for us to finish on this evening?
Absolutely, it would be my pleasure. Um, so there are always the potential threats when exploring empty houses for the possibility of spirits, ghosts, or other creepy things. It is always possible that you could fall into what I like to call the Luton trap, where you take a torch with you, a flashlight, and you move around the building, shining it, and what you are doing is effectively setting up an environment in which the only place the spirit could possibly be is right over your shoulder behind you. Um, so, accordingly, I'm a great believer that you should have two torches facing in opposite directions and attach a mirror to the top of this unit so you can actually see over your shoulder while you're walking. It's a better way of doing things than my earlier experiments with walking backwards into everywhere, because it turns out that really only allows you to see where you've already been.
It's a good tip, and I think your beloved Darcy Bustle must have read that tip because last I heard, she's been walking everywhere, looking over her shoulder regularly.
Exactly. I'm so proud of the fact that she seems to have embraced my lifestyle. She actually, I hear from other people that she's genuinely quite interested in my whereabouts and my activities. It's tremendous.
Ah, as are we all, Rick, as are we all. And I'm sure I speak for the rest of our snufflers that we wish you well with your house purchase. Just 2 streets away from your wife is quite some movement. Things are really hotting up in the relationship.
It is by far the closest we've ever been, and I don't just mean lived.
No, the wedding day, they were heady days. You spent most of that day within a dozen steps of each other.
Yes, yes, much of it. Yes.
Well, Rick, as our time draws to an end, thank you so much for sharing so many great adventures with me. As people know, I'm many years younger than Rick, and he was my inspiration as I was growing into the world of snuffling for truth truffles, and it's been an absolute delight to learn from such a man who has such a reputation in the community.
I do carry a reputation. I do carry a reputation. Thank you, my friend. It has been a treat, as always, and a privilege to explore these topics with you.
And thank you, dear viewers, Sparrow, Slayer, um, Russ, anyone else that's still around that's been lurking. And we respect that because sometimes it's quite hard in a group to share your true beliefs. But we hope that over time of watching us, the Truth Foragers, you will feel more awakened and more empowered to to share and to look more into what is out there because
Hmm.
there's far more than meets the eye, Rick, as you know. So thank you, dear friends, and we hope that the Boys in the Baltic Star will allow us back sooner rather than later. I believe we've already been offered space in Faversham, Rick, this year, um, on at least one occasion to speak to a crowd to share our learnings of this town.
Yes, yes. It's something we've done before. A public appearance. Um, well, as long as we can make sure that it meets the requirements of my restraining order, it'll be perfect.
Exactly. Well, we shall dates. We shall let you know. Um, I believe I do have the date sent to me. I believe it's in the Guildhall as well, a very historical venue.
Ah, tremendous.
Uh,
And the Guildhall has other benefits, most notably that it is actually physically removed from the planet.
exactly, it is on stilts.
It is.
So one step closer to heaven, as a pop band once sang.
Only once.
Anyone wants. So we shall leave you with that. Slayer, we shall be in touch with dates, of course, and thank you, dear friends. Please keep snuffling for truth truffles. Do not remove that program that downloaded onto your computers because it will format your hard drive. It is for your own good and for your peace of mind. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, dear friends. We shall be back soon, but keep snuffling, and the truth is indeed around us. Good night.
Good night.